stock market program. If the stock is growing in value, its temperature increases. So you just wave your hand over it and you just find the hot stock and buy 1,000 shares.
Amazing. I mean, that's a great use case.
Ladies and gentlemen, people of the internet, welcome back to Mind Gap. We still have tech innovator Anuraj with us in the studio, and you've got a little presentation prepared for us, Anuraj. So over to you, my friend.
Well, thank you so much, Sima. So I've got actually lots of slides, but I'll go through some selective ones, which will be starting with, really looking at exponential technologies and holistic well-being. And what I'll go through is some key mega trends shaping the future of humanity, looking at the intersection of exponential technology and spirituality. That's been one of my deep passions for the last couple of plus decades, and really looking at how consciousness is evolving us to a whole new future mindset or exponential mindset, looking at how we can embrace this new trend of wearables, which I call future is way to able. And then
I like that.
So I'll start off with one of the key trends, which I think everybody's aware of very much, that we're living in this VUCA world, and volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity.
Yeah.
What is the volatility? Oh, I guess you're going to go through it now.
Yeah, no, so I'm saying it's as a subheading there, the rate of change, what we're really seeing is
of course.
The pace of change is so rapidly evolving. I'll give you some examples of that as we move on. But we've really seen that the whole VUCA phenomena has accelerated so rapidly because of the pandemic. And it's something which obviously we'd been noticing for quite a while that had been happening, but now it's gone so much faster. But I'm going to actually talk about a new VUCA, which will be towards the end of my presentation, which is what we need to aspire towards with the more positive, abundant mindset, much along the lines of our white mirror philosophy. So over the time, I actually, coined three decades of my career, three buzzwords that I've coined. The first one is called simplicity, and which is really about driving simplicity in an increasingly complex world, architecture or environment.
That's the Apple's middle name is Simplexity.
Well, that's it, exactly. So it's really during the time of my early days of tinkering and designing mobile devices that it was all about hiding the technology in the back end and enabling the simplicity so that the UX and experience really is everything. So which experience really becomes the function of hardware, software, content and services. That's really where we see it to thrive, to that level.
It's important.
So it's all about providing that holistic end user experience, which is the front end, which is really all that matters for the end user. The next term I'd coined is being called collaboration, which is open collaborative innovation. And that's very much about how do we have an open and collaborative innovation culture to curate relevant ecosystems, enabling the future exponential and abundant mindsets using transdisciplinarity. So cross-industry and multiple disciplines. So really bringing in stage-left thinking, as I call it also.
Yeah, that's very, very important. I had one of those issues at my place.
Right.
Where we had a pool heater and the air conditioner, two things doing exactly the same thing. Sorry, opposite things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
One's cooling the house and throwing hot air outside.
Yes.
The other one's heating the pool and throwing cold air outside. And they could have you could have joined the two together and halved the electricity bill.
Yep.
But no, you can't, because it'll void the warranty, because the insurance won't cover it, and because people weren't prepared to even do that. So,
well, exactly. I mean, that's why if you can collaborate and bring in functionalities together, so 1 + 1 is not 2, but it's more than 11 in that sense. It's how do you combine things and make it, enhance it and amplify it to such a high degree that it actually adds so much immense value at the end. And that's really the essence of what I'm meaning through collaboration.
Wow.
So open collaborative innovation.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I like that very much.
So it's a pretty wide and, obviously open term in that sense. But I think if you can apply it in many different aspects and angles, and I think you gave such a great example there now of a very practical, pain point that you've seen. And such a great opportunity that if we can combine and make something so powerful, that would lead to such a great innovation. And that's really where I think the world needs to head faster, and we need to think along those lines to implement and tinker with those sort of ideas, so that we can actually solve some amazing problems and reduce wastage and bring more sustainability for humanity.
Well said.
So I think the next term I'd coined called experiation, which has really been in the last decade. In fact, it's more in the last 7 odd years, and it's really about transforming experiential learning or tinkering from what we know of passive storytelling to immersive story showing. And I take that story showing into a next level, saying story being, story doing, story living. So what I'm meaning in that sense is about that experience is everything, but it's about how do you experience into a phenomena and actually be part of that story and being a living, breathing aspect of what that story could lead you to, and you're actually immersed into it so deeply that it's, and that's where we see technologies like AR, VR, MR, XR, so mixed reality, extended reality, and so forth, those terms coming in and enabling with those technologies that really story showing through very deep 3D visualization, but then moving that even deeper into touching all our senses. So that's where I actually combine the world of wearables and sensors and biofeedback with visualization, with techniques, so that we can actually immerse ourselves into media in a whole new way.
So is it like a stock market program where you could wave your hand over all the stocks and you make something that if the stock is growing in value, its temperature increases, so you just wave your hand over it and you just find the hot stock and then grab it and buy 1,000 shares.
Amazing. I mean, that's a great use case. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of what we're really seeing from where science fiction can become science reality.
Yeah, because I mean, we have all of these sensors that can crunch data so well. Instead of clicking, is that stock going up? No. Next, click.
Yeah.
You're going through one data point every 10 seconds and straining your eyes. You could literally wave your hand over and touch 1,000 stocks in 5 seconds and pick out the hottest one.
Yeah. In fact, that's where I talk about, in fact, another slide I've got on moving from the GUI to the NUI, from the graphical user interface to the natural user interface. So gesture-based,
like that.
voice recognition, everything comes in, from a much more natural perspective, right?
Yes.
And I think we've seen great examples of that with the Nintendo Wii, and I was one of the very early buyers of that product, playing with, obviously gesture-based. But then as it moved on to Project Natal by Microsoft, which became the Xbox, and obviously the what they've done with depth sensing cameras and then all
LiDAR,
that moved even deeper. Well, LiDAR comes is also further down the track with that. What I call Media 3.0.
Yeah.
And so it's I think very interesting to see that evolution as we get much more closer to natural experiences and interactions that we can have with our environment, with objects, with technology, which sort of merge with the environment.
Because that's a big part of innovation is people touching on their experiences, going, this happened, let's create something to make that process easier. I guess that's how innovation sort of creates from people's experiences in certain situations.
Totally. Exactly. So let me just move on. The other key trend, of course, that we all have immersed and very much know of is that we're living in a hyper-connected world, with the empowered customers and users. Even Time magazine voted us, you, the person of the year in 2007. So, it's something that has been happening already for quite some time. And the other aspect that the World Economic Forum has obviously been pointing towards is the industrial revolutions. And the fourth industrial revolution is what is maturing very rapidly. But we've moved from mechanization to electrification to mass production to automation. And then the computer revolution that we're currently going deeper into as the fourth industrial revolution is really the convergence and fusion of exponential technologies such as IoT, AI, big data, cloud, blockchain, robotics, synthetic biology, and so forth. So basic augmentation of intelligence across the board really happening in that regard. And what that's moving on to is actually another this has just been loved in the last couple of years, the fifth industrial revolution, which is very much about humanity. And it's about, refocusing on what matters, and the integration of and the cooperation of man and machine. So as we're moving deeper into sort of space of robotics, as you know, and tech converging to a high level of intelligence and connecting with consciousness. So I think that's where we're realizing that humanity first, or having that humane technology implementation is very critical, so that we don't lose and get too mechanized or too, as we see robotic implementations with AI, which really, I even dare to say AI should have not been called artificial intelligence. It really is moving into a phase where it's augmenting intelligence. So that's where I think we know about AGI or ANI even before that, which is the narrow artificial narrow intelligence, but moving into artificial general intelligence, and then moving into artificial superintelligence, which is the third sort of phase, which is where we talk about the singularity being near, and what Ray Kurzweil talks about in that sort of space, which is we're talking about. I think what he's predicted is the year 2029, and then 2045, when we become equal to intelligence, or artificial intelligence equates humanity, and then 2045 is when it exceeds it. So you've got getting to the singularity sort of phase, which is pretty interesting. But I think again they're just numbers and predictions. But of course we know that we're heading to a much more sophisticated and a very exponential growth with intelligence. But I think at the same time, what you'll see in my presentation is very much about how humanity is evolving, and there are so many things that cannot be done by AI or by technology as yet, which are key traits of humanity, of curiosity and empathy and so forth, which is where the future of work and the future of life, as we know, is currently evolving, and what we need to build so much deeper on those sort of traits.
Right.
So moving on, exponential technologies. I think we know that these are the key sort of areas that I mentioned earlier, with quantum computing also moving so rapidly. I've heard of the Gartner's emerging technology hype cycle. We've really seen examples like AR, VR, and then when I talked about AGI, for example, which is progressing towards the predictions much more rapidly. We've seen the bidirectional BCI, the brain-computer interface, where EEG now is evolving into more means of a dual-way pathway, where I'll talk a little bit later about where Elon Musk has been doing so much interesting work with Neuralink in that space. Then I've got a product here which I can show you, which also has a bidirectional BCI interface.
Oh, hello.
Very pioneering, with using something called TDCS, or transcranial direct current stimulation. And we'll get into that in a bit. So my remit has really been that technology is enabling access to affordable solutions for individuals to take charge of their holistic well-being and so that they can become happier, healthier, and more spiritually connected, allowing us to live more meaningful lives. So when we talk about the pace of change, we look at back in the year 1900, the Fifth Avenue, New York, you've had the horse and cart, which was the dominant means of transport, but you had the motor car, which was just the one of those sort of in that sort of time frame. But 13 years later, and as you know, Ford Motor Company was one of the first to obviously launch the motor car back then. In 13 years, they displaced the horse and cart, as you see here in red, which is just the horse and cart. One of those where so many motor cars have sort of come in. So things even back then revolved so quickly. We really are living in those exponential times, and we've seen that pace of change move so rapidly that we move from that early phase of deception, and once we surpass the knee of the curve, we go into that disruptive phase and then move really into a very highly exponential sort of area. So when I tell you that if you take 31 meter steps, linear steps, you've traveled 30 meters, right? But if I ask you, how much would you have traveled if you take 30 exponential steps or on a logarithmic scale?
2, 4, 6, 8. I know that. Yeah.
More. Lots more?
How much more? So
many millions.
Millions, yeah?
Really?
Many millions.
Oh,
exactly. So, you've actually traveled 1 million kilometers or
a billion.
A billion meters.
A billion meters.
Yeah. And you know what that is? It's over 26 times around the Earth.
Oh my
So
Lord.
it's very hard to comprehend with the linear thinking what exponential growth is about. And I think that's where we at Singularity University, we talk about the 6 Ds, of Diamandis and Kotler. Peter and Steve had sort of come up with this framework where whatever can be digitized goes through the phase of deception, disruption, is dematerialized, demonetized, and eventually democratized. So we've really seen that happen across the board here.
On Facebook.
With so many examples of that. And I mean, again, my industry that I grew up with the cellular phone, the mobile phone sort of space, how it has been democratized. I've been involved with emerging market devices, launching them at sub $25 at one stage, even designing a phone for below $9. This is 12 years ago, which was the world's cheapest phone at 500 rupees Indian, and we called it the people's phone. So that was a very innovative device without even a display on it. So that's when we really saw technology being democratized. So somebody for whom
so accessible to
exactly, it was
the most amount of people,
affordability, that brought about such a great phenomena of deep penetration. Because in India and emerging markets, we've seen the mobile phone and early entry-level smartphones are actually the first computer that people are holding in their hands. It's the first camera. It's the first connection to the internet. So it's really their touch point to the world.
Right.
And it's really amazing to see the applications and the use cases that they put themselves into. So I've spent 6-7 years of my career after moving from the West to India and Africa, where in fact I worked with the Indian government to design the world's cheapest tablet called the Akash Tablet. So there was a whole team of us which looked at learnings from one laptop per child and Simputer. So there were many other examples like that which had some great ideas behind it, and they penetrated to a certain level. But then we took those learnings and applied them to the Akash tablet. And we went through a few iterations of Akash because, again, it had an order of over 100 million units for education. So it was K-12 education for the students in emerging markets to really give them a education. And it was a $35 tablet that was launched, back then, 12 years ago.
Wow. And still in use, like in production?
Very much. And of course, it democratized to that level that there are so many players in that market with that type of, it sort of led to the whole industry coming up with low-cost devices and access devices, as we call it.
Yeah.
And the Chinese, of course, who brought in smartphones and took it one may say that they copied a lot of the phones or, did a knockoff versions of iPhones and so forth, but then they innovated further on them. They added so much more functionality, but then it led to that democratization. But I think over time, as quality improved and things have sort of come a long way at the right price point, we're seeing great value for money from that. And everybody sort of embraced that megatrend to bring in that value proposition to a whole new level.
Wow.
So we've seen human development, obviously, and Facebook. This is exponential and global. Their sort of growth.
That's a good example, isn't it, of technology and exponential growth is like Facebook.
Correct.
When it came out, everyone's like, "What's this?" And now almost every single person has it across the world.
Exactly. So Facebook is in more countries than, and by itself can be a bigger, is one of the larger countries if you just look at the number of subscribers. That it has, or the users in the base. So it's no longer about creating ecosystems, it's about curating them. And this is kind of the early part of my world that I've worked in the telecom industry, looking at the convergence from media industries and the internet industry. And it was combining all that thinking. So a lot of the innovations I worked on, including devising a world's first movie phone, which I'll talk about a bit later, is something that we, when we looked at the different worlds colliding, so having worked in Hollywood and Bollywood and looking at content and context and bringing it together with hardware and seeing how could we apply and create an experience which was very breakthrough for an end user is what we looked at as some of the great innovations to devise these solutions in the market.
Wow.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is another key trend, of course, is each industry is being disrupted in its own right, and learning and education that I've been quite involved with. We're seeing the, MOOCs, or there are tens and thousands of massively online open courses out there. And we can go ourselves online to even Stanford D School, for example, and do a MOOC on a specific design course with them. Or there is access to so much learning, and it's a lifelong learning concept that we're really embracing today. It's no longer about going to university necessarily or going into an old school thinking approach. It's about collaborative, open learning.
There's new online universities kind of.
Exactly, and that too, so that's where I think universities and educational institutes are reinventing themselves to keep up with this new trend. And what we're really seeing, in fact, myself having been in that role as a professor at many universities and business schools, teaching innovation, entrepreneurship, strategy, and I've seen that, it's no longer about being a sage on the stage. It's about being a guide on the side, and that's that really key trend of how you sort of get students to learn things on their own.
Yep.
And then they come into class and we collaborate and discuss more use cases and case studies, and look at real world sort of scenarios on how they can apply that learning.
It's like if I told you, how do you get to the pub? How do you get to the train station?
Mm-hmm.
So you got to go straight, take a left, then you'll see a church, then go around the roundabout, then turn right. You'll be lost. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Go around the place, familiarize yourself with the church and all that, and then ask the question, hey, how do you get to the train station? Well, you know that road, you turn left and you see the church, and there's a roundabout, you turn right, and you're following it because you've already been there.
Right.
So these guys who've gone out and done this business, and they've failed and they've tried things, and then you come back and then you mentor them, and then when you say, look, when you do this and this happens, then you've got to do this, it clicks.
That's it. It's that share of wisdom, because that's what you sort of people who've you can fast track your learnings by learning from learnings from those learnings, or rather from the failures that others have sort of tinkered with. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel in many cases.
It's like,
and you go further from there.
Because I always, when I was at school, it seemed a bit ham-fisted a lot of the times. Like they would just say, hey, why is this like this? Well, it's because, but we haven't even asked ourselves the question yet. So you need to ask the question. So it's like, get us to think first, get us to be puzzled, and then go, why are you puzzled? Well, you might be asking yourself, why is this the case? Well, here's the answer, and we're waiting for the answer.
That's right.
Rather than the answer being shoved down your throat saying, look, you got to know this, by the way. It just goes in one ear and out the other.
Oh, totally. And I think you said exactly that point. It's the why, and that's where Simon Sinek, for example, who's gone so deep into understanding the why, is so critical for every. It's the first of every single question, really, or understanding of a problem. And I think when we devised in my innovation sort of framework, we had the 5 W's and the H. So who, what, where, when, why. So you would look at all those scenarios and then say how at the end. So it's coming up with all of that together is when you sort of formulate that solution of the problem that you're trying to address.
Yeah, because a lot of the times it's not that people can't learn or are just not conducive to learning. It's that they don't want to. They are not they're not in a frame of mind to learn.
Right.
Like I would see all these people in school, they're not.
Their attention's not there.
Yeah, their attention's not there.
That's right.
But they will tell you every single player in football, in their favorite team. They'll tell you every single racing team and what they did last season. They'll tell you all the lyrics of the latest, songs out. So their brain is ingesting information.
It's about the interest, right?
The interest isn't peaked.
And passion, it's how to, and that's kind of where I talk about with startups, saying it's the 4 P's. So it's the right people, having the right passion, the deep passion, with a sense of deep purpose, to be able to create that compelling product. So that's kind of where we see, where I see the startup ecosystem, and kind of bucket those into saying, okay, that's what will make the right, storyline and the concoction to create that a successful startup. So it's getting all of that right, so that all the ingredients and everything sort of comes together in the right way, so that it sort of confines to make you more successful and faster, to fast track your your journey there. So as I was saying about learning, this is one of the business schools I was teaching at. We actually had a global EMBA program, which was ranked in the top 5 in the world amongst Harvard and Stanford even. And I was teaching there actually at the Sydney campus, and we've got a campus in Dubai, Singapore, Mumbai, and Sydney. So it's a global MBA program where you expose people with that broad learnings across the world, and giving that exposure. And again, as I said, even my own journey, it's travel and exposure into these different cultures and immersing yourself with with that sort of global thinking is where you learn the most actually, and it opens your horizon, broadens your mind so much that you can actually come up with a lot more innovative sort of thinking and frameworks. So we'd applied this sort of engaged learning online program, and as you can see here, it's something which we'd actually even had for several years, even before the pandemic, and something which has been happening across the board now, where we've had to embrace online learning across the board. And other key trend in education we're noticing is moving from STEM to STEAM to what I call STEAM, so which is science, technology, engineering, maths, but STEAM is entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So it's that holistic approach of adding in the other, and that sort of collates back to the transdisciplinarity element I was talking about
with
with
psychologists
innovation.
and all that. This all makes sense. We had I have to mention this because this is all making sense. We had another person on. I can't remember her name. She was Hooterbell, and she was a educator, and we talked about
Gemma Armstrong.
Gemma Armstrong, right? And she said that music and art it kind of opens the brain up to be more receptive to maths, physics, and chemistry.
Oh, totally right.
So you can't just be thinking about numbers and maths. Yes. You can just listen to music and hear the maths, oscillate.
Exactly, it's the melody of mathematics of numbers, maybe. That's.
And then your brain is open to go. Oh, okay. Now here's the math of it, and here's the art. So it's your left brain and your right brain being exercised, and they just both are more receptive.
Totally, and I think if you look at the fractal imaging, for example, which is really mathematics and geometric symmetries and asymmetries which are coming together with, say, the Mandelbrot set or something, which is entirely mathematically driven.
It's amazing.
It's visually so appealing and has so much depth with
and beautiful
what it's trying to convey. Exactly. Yeah. So there's, I think, even in nature, and that's what we notice, that there's mathematics all around us.
And it's always in the M set. It's got just this pattern, like it looks like a little beetle, and it's everywhere. You zoom in for 5 minutes, it's still, you can see these beetles just.
You can keep zooming in and you'll
stops.
come down to the subatomic level, really, pretty much, and see the pattern repeat.
Thing.
Exactly, quite interesting. So a similar sort of trend we're noticing with the democratization in healthcare, and that's where we really see that self-help health patients won't just be empowered, they'll be emancipated with data-driven medicine. And I think health is the true wealth. It's in your hands, at your fingertips. And what we're really noticing is moving from that, what's currently actually the sick care, to true healthcare once we move on to the self-care model. So as we move from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive to prescriptive analytics. And that's kind of where we see this model of true healthcare play as we move forward, So moving on to, wellness ecosystem is pretty wide. The future of wellness is at the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern science. And similarly, spirituality, it's really about taking a deep dive within us, but it's about very much trying to see how do we harness the environment around us to go deeper, to understand ourselves better, so that we can apply ourselves more effectively in the world that we live in. And I think what we're seeing with Maslow's hierarchy also, as we move up the ladder and transcend ourselves into from physical to intelligent to emotional to the spiritual quotient, where really we are driven by elements like compassion, equanimity, and so forth. And I think those were some interesting learnings that we imbibed. And again, talking about Steve Jobs, he and his friend Daniel Kotke traveled to India on kind of a spiritual exploration, on a journey in April of 1974. So he traveled to the Himalayas, and I actually grew up in the foothills of the Himalayas, so something close to my heart.
Oh, nice.
And so northern India, when he was out there on his spiritual pilgrimage, he followed Zen Buddhism to start with, but he opened his mind to looking at so he traveled to many ashrams and pilgrimage places in India to kind of rediscover himself. And then actually many people allude that in 1976, 1st of April, when Apple was actually formally formed, so he was actually working with Atari at that time prior to that. But then when he and the other Steve got together, Steve was, that a lot of his clarity in formulating Apple came from his journey to India.
Wow, that
In
makes
fact,
sense.
one of his favorite books was this one called Autobiography of a Yogi by Swami Paramahansa Yogananda. And this is one of his favorite sayings: having the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow know what you truly want to become. So I think it's that allusion to the clarity and the enlightenment of discovering that purpose, which is what led him to, create the phenomena of Apple at the very early days. And in fact, this book, which was the only book on his iPad, by the way, and as an ebook that he carried, and he would read it very frequently again and again, and it was the book that given to everybody at his funeral too. So a lot of interesting learnings about spiritual ancient wisdom that he picked up and actually applied even in his work, that is very subtly present in what we've seen with Apple and its success over time.
Wow.
Oh.
And I think those were interesting touch points in a conversation I had with Steve Jobs around that spirituality and technology early angle, which is what, when I met him also during the time of the iPhone, the very first iPhone back in 2006, when it was to be launched, they launched it in 2007. But it was really about how do we imbibe some of those elements of kind of well-being and that holistic, spiritual, well, very subtle sort of angle into that product. And it was, I would say, interesting tinkering of ideas that we had back then. So, and it was the time at Siemens when I actually did a lot of in-depth work in this space, and this was a mood board that we'd come up with as one of the examples, really technology helping us reconnect ourselves, looking at authenticity and natural ways of life, and key trends that were influencing us from mood to materials and ambience to environment. And it was the key megatrends of global balance, so work-life balance, personal balances, living in a 24/7 lifestyle. And I think that's where we noticed that stress levels have been rising. It's been the slow poison. So when we looked at perceived stress, burnouts, depression, life satisfaction, all that has just escalated and accelerated to a level where it's become so critical with the pandemic, as we know. It's just grown so rapidly. But the fuzzing boards, the work of life, immense need for balance is what we're really striving towards, right? And that's where holistic wellness sort of comes in. So I've been talking about how do we take all our senses to a new dimension. So each of our senses, through technology and enabling it to a journey that we can go much beyond. And I think one of the concepts that I came up with my team at Siemens, again, that's where we had so many new ideas, and we actually had a company called Product Visionaires in Berlin to look at the next 10 years of what mobile devices could look like. And this was one of the devices that we came up with, which was, I'm talking about 15 years ago now, with using music as key therapy, sound and audio integration. And this was really, we called it the Zen device. And it was around kind of a wellness oasis or a spa phone concept, which was focused on music as the primary means of relaxation.
Wow.
And it deployed haptic ball interfaces, noise cancelling headphones back then. The Zen tunes you into your environment and transforms you into a relaxing audio tactile experience. And the product claim was to add a new and unique soundtrack to your life.
Wow.
So imagine you're in a concrete jungle like New York or something. You can put yourself into a cocoon and have this device take you into your bliss mode.
Nice.
So it's a term again that I've been talking about as we have aircraft mode in mobile phones. So I say there's another mode called bliss mode. It's not, and that's what I ended up presenting Dalai Lama with. I said it's not about switching off your phone, it's about flipping it into what I call the bliss mode. So it's how technology, it's not about giving up or hiding the technology or disabling it.
I guess
It's
that's what meditating is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's airplane mode for your mind.
Right. There you go. Exactly. So I think with the number of apps and the whole ecosystem that came up with looking at meditation and mindfulness, and there's such a plethora of ideas there. So we'd been taking that to the next level and saying, okay, how do we use biofeedback? How can we integrate it at kind of a much deeper level of sensing your stress levels and then alleviating them with the right curated and hyper-personalized solution for you. And this is one of the early tinkerers. So that's what actually the Zen phone looked like, as you can see here with the haptic. And as I said, the bliss mode and the different sort of scenarios there with the noise cancelling headphones, the haptic ball interfaces.
So it's a real evolution between with innovation, because back in the day it was problem, solution. Yet everything you're talking about here, there are so many dimensions that are going into innovation of products. It's not just problem, solution.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh, exactly. That's right. So it's about how do you think out of that box really, and say that, okay, what could be anticipated problems, or what, and that's where I think you need to look at foresights. And a lot of the work that I've been doing as a pseudo-futurist in that regard is insights is something which will of course help you in finding solutions to existing problems. But if you can anticipate future problems, you look at latent needs, you look at unmet needs of customers, and that's kind of where you look at, you need to build foresights. And that's what Apple was really good at in that regard. And Steve Jobs could foresee the complexity being applied so deeply that that's what the iPhone did. It wasn't the first. Apple has never been first with the music player. The iPod came so much later.
That's right.
Sony was out there revolutionizing it and created
Walkman.
Even the Apple Newton. Before that, there were many other tablets. But then Apple Newton, again, Apple also made a mistake. So they killed the Apple Newton, but 17 years later, it was reborn. It created a whole new category, and it was the iPad, born as a whole new version of a tablet. So they kind of, the moment they come in, they really changed the whole ball game, and created a whole new scenario for that world. So it was really different elements of the device ecosystem that I had the team look at as we looked at the body, mind, and soul, equating it to kind of the physical, mental, and spiritual sort of angles, looking at, say, design experience, user experience, and brand experience and product feeling. So we sort of took a deep dive into each of these, where we said industrial experience, the soft experience on the front end, and looking at the brand, harmonization, and looking at that deeper connect to the actual user, was all needed to be in harmony, so that's when you would really see that product thriving. And like I said, when I all this led me to meeting the Dalai Lama with a lot of serendipity and spending an hour with him, and I was just full of, I would say, bliss, and the happiness that sort of he aroused with his aura around us few who met him at that time. And I was very fortunate to be leading the whole presentation to present him this concept of spirituality meets the mobile, or wireless meets wellness, which we call Project Shunya or Project Om early on. And I sort of created this vision saying, imagine a world where we've created a breakthrough phenomena where a mobile device is being used to help heal people from their suffering, helping bring a better work-life balance, helping one relax, and humanity rediscover our true essence. So it was with that sort of big vision or massively transforming purpose, or a moonshot thinking, as one may call it, as we talk about in Singularity U, was what led to this tinkering journey that I've had, and the quest I'm still on very much, of harnessing very compelling solutions in the space of technology and spirituality converging. Nice. And the solution really, as we know that it's happiness. It's difficult to find happiness within ourselves, but it's impossible to find it anywhere else. So it very much lies within. And in Sanskrit, we talk about Tattvamasi, or that thou art, that we are that deeper consciousness. So it's how do we connect to that from our physical world, but through technology as a key enabler, but not getting bogged down with technology. So all it is helping us to, and that's where we see these apps of mindfulness and meditation and yoga practices and so many other means of quantifying ourselves with biofeedback, which will enable us to be faster to achieving that goal.
There was also, I think I read about people who are trying to find a life partner, and they struggle to find a life partner, and the advice given to them is, before you can find someone else, you have to be happy with yourself.
That's it.
And then when you're happy with yourself, you can find someone else who's. So it's like, this is all. It all makes sense.
You've got to look after yourself first, only then you can help others. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
So
I think, and that's why the happiness first comes by yourself deep within having that, and
because it's all you've got control of is you.
And that's exactly what I saw with Dalai Lama, for example. His Holiness, who was just so clear with his own deep purpose and having that bliss mode exuberated, and the aura he created and the environment and everybody else around him was feeling the same, because it's
And there was another quote that ties in with this, and it is stress is caused by you have not made a decision yet. So you're thinking about something. You could even make a decision. I will decide to think about this later, and it just lifts up. And so, if the Dalai Lama, if anyone is able to clear their thoughts, and just be in that moment, just completely happy with their situation, their lot in life, their future expectations, everything. That will give you the clarity to then think very clearly and have no stress.
Totally, exactly. Yeah, it's how do you remove it out entirely when you have that depth of clarity and purpose.
Yeah.
And then when you've got all of that colliding, which is really something I'll talk about later, called the Ikigai, the Japanese philosophy, which is aligned with your massively transforming purpose. So it's when the world confines and the universe confides to help you achieve your goals, when you have that really wide clarity come in. So I think what we've seen in spirituality will really reestablish that harmony for us, and we've seen the universe residing within us, the microcosm, and equating to the cosmos in space. So it really establishes that purpose of saying, if you can't go outside, you go inside. And that's kind of what we've seen with the pandemic, and we really need to invite that to a much more subtle and a spiritual level for us. And that leads me to this phase of how do we use technology to enable us to get to those phases faster? And that's where I say wearables are much more, they manifested to a new age smart device movement and exponential reinvention that has occurred, which I call wear to able. And it really sits at the intersection of technology and humanity. So I was very fortunate to curate and deliver various wearable tech fashion parades, high-tech, fashion shows also in a way for Singularity U Australia, and last year at Costa Rica, and in fact looking at some very innovative tech that was showcased, as you can see here, and I'll go through some of those examples. We've seen wrist-worn wearables move into hearables, which becoming disappearables. And we'll look at various examples of some of these as we kind of go along. This is Nadi X, or Smart Yoga Tights, which monitors your movements and helps you correct your yoga posture and trains you on new poses. And Nadi X is kind of intelligent, sort of yoga, as I said, yoga tights, which are guiding you for your exercises, and it vibrates, with that smart, tactile feedback. So it's really giving you a very personalized instruction through the app, the paid app that it's got with it. And then we've seen other examples like the Tesla suit. So this is a very innovative folks that we brought to Australia, and with my friend Peter Zing, we actually helped them to be pioneeringly, showcased at our 2019 Singularity U Australia Summit. And last year I was fortunate to be at the launch of their Tesla suit glove. But it's Fusion Exponential Technologies, which is contextual full body haptics with virtual reality as a wearable. And what it does is motion capture, biometrics, haptics to a much in-depth level. And it's got a range of applications, from enterprise applications to training solutions, and now very much in health and wellness, and a kind of a medical grade level where you can measure vitals and look at a lot more holistic approach to your well-being as a whole. So that's kind of where we see, and even climate control. So we actually had examples of them being used for firefighter training. As you know, we had a lot of bushfires here in Australia. So imagine being able to simulate heat and putting people through that environment and giving them the training for becoming a firefighter.
Wow.
And here's a quick video of the Tesla suit, which you'll see many examples of. And then last year, as I said, at CES 2020 in Vegas, they launched the haptic glove with a much more immersive, connection to the virtual world. And it has air pouches in the fingertips for more immersive touch points and giving you that real haptic, true haptic sort of feedback with various biometric systems integrated in the device. So yeah, there's a pretty exciting sort of space of wearables, but then also smart devices. And again, here's a smart device which has 4 wheels on it. It's called an automobile. It's called a car.
I remember that one.
But they're moving into the smarter space, and I was very honored to be at the launch again last year at CES 2020 on the 9th of January actually, of this concept with the premiere of this concept called AVTR, the Avatar, by Mercedes-Benz, and what Daimler chairman and James Cameron, who produced Avatar, of course, joined hands to come up with this very futuristic concept. And it's a realization of holistic well-being, actually, with a full autonomous future with mood and stress analytics, adaptive UI, integrated spiritual and natural environments, vegan materials. It's got full health vitals. It's got virtual personalized landscapes seamlessly projected across the interior. So we're talking about a hyper screen in there, which is being actually realized as an MBUX, which Mercedes launched this year, which will be seen in the new vehicle, the GLS, in fact, coming up end of this year. So imagine having your personal spa oasis in an autonomous vehicle, ensuring that you arrive rejuvenated and energized. So the journey actually becomes a retreat.
Yeah, instead of being tired, the more you sit in the car,
exactly,
you actually feel better after a long journey.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a vehicle that a concept that actually I'd been working on even many years before, when we did a workshop with BP Castrol, and we looked at a lot of ideas around health and wellness integrating in a smart automotive environment, and it was just so amazing to see a lot of that realized in this concept vehicle which has been inspired by nature, deep spiritual elements, and the UI is so intuitive and so much foresight which has been integrated that we can learn from. So in fact, the concept car philosophy is what we adopted at Siemens, because we had a lot of concept phones, and we took that learnings from Daimler-Benz and from other the automotive industry to say how could we showcase compelling technologies, even though they might not be ripe at that time, but to actually have it brought out and think through use cases and brainstorm and collaborate with others to find very more deeper, meaningful applications for it.
Wow.
So here's actually a video of this was shot with my own cell phone, hence the varying quality. But this was the very first unveiling of this, and I was very fortunate to be sitting right at the front, very close to Steve Wozniak, who was the chief guest of that show. And in fact, I met him there for the 3rd time during that day, and we had a great quick catch up at CES after many years.
Wow!
Can you imagine that driving down the road?
So the future's already here. It's just not very evenly distributed.
Oh, I like that.
And so another, coming back to kind of wearables and technologies. So Relax VR was one of the startups I helped incubate here in Australia. They're actually in Silicon Valley now. And I've been a mentor with them right from the very early days, where we looked at so many ideas of meditation, mindfulness, and merged it into a virtual reality environment. So it's a deeply immersive relaxation experience using VR and meditation. And it combines beautiful global landscapes, high-resolution multimedia. It has guided meditations, soothing music with it. And so imagine a 5, 10, or 15-minute digital detox that you could do in there.
A digital detox. I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Ooh,
so you're still using technology, but you're actually doing a detox using a beautiful environment. In fact, this is something we've been exploring with Positive Prime, which is another great, interesting movement that is a startup that I'm mentoring right now out of Queensland, where we're looking at immersing yourself with the right environment, with the right multimedia, with the right what you surround yourself with, and learning from thought leaders, having a full framework and platform so that you could actually imbibe the best from the collective wisdom that is around us. And so there's many different aspects of what the whole positive prime sort of philosophy and mindset brings about.
Wow.
So we're moving into this world where we've seen holography play to a whole new level, which is around the corner really. And what that is really about storytelling with tech, humanity, and arts done a full 360. And we've seen higher spatial psychological connection and decision making, which is really, as we've done a kind of a go around from campfires to theaters to cinema to television to smartphones, and now to mobile holograms. So it's really that connection with humanity and that people. So I was very fortunate to be at the Opera House a few years ago, about 5 years ago now, with Professor Stephen Hawking delivering a keynote as a hologram.
Wow.
And this was when he did that. So it's very much about less things and more people. And as I think we know about science, fiction from Star Wars and Star Trek, a lot of that can be made so much real now with holography. So moving on to this next phase of mind sensors or brainwave EEG and applications. So Neurosky and Mindplay have been closely associated with these companies, and Neurosky was an early pioneer with EEG or electroencephalography in the brain-computer interface, and it's a very cost-effective biosensor with has so many applications in the market across consumer electronics, health, wellness, education, and training. And we're looking at examples like Sleep Shepherd and addressing insomnia, sleep apnea, and sleep paralysis, for example, with a comprehensive sleep lab, which Sleep Shepherd has. So Sleep Shepherd essentially has, it has a speaker in the fabric integrated, which plays binaural beats as your natural body clock, along with your natural body clock. So it wakes you up with, to not your chronological alarm, but to your natural body alarm, to your to that sort of level. So I think we're seeing some really interesting applications in that sort of space with smart wearables. The other interesting wearable is the Muse, actually, which I've been very fortunate to be an ambassador for. And what it is a personal meditation assistant that helps you get calm and relaxed state much faster by providing real-time feedback for your mind and body. So it's using research-grade EEG and sort of passively senses your brain activity and translates it into guiding sounds and nature and helps you stay calm and focused. So Muse actually recently launched, or last year they launched the Muse S Band, which we'll showcase. And it actually has EEG, PPG, accelerometer. It even measures your heart rate, pulse oximetry, and breathing with sort of these
If
sensors.
you're getting stressed, it picks up that you're getting stressed and it gives you methods to calm yourself down.
Exactly. You can actually curate a specific meditation for you. So it's got a big library of several hundred types of different meditations. You can pick different ones. You can pick ones for sleep, for example, to help you, have the more ideal means to go to sleep sooner. And now the new versions are going to also be able to monitor sleep and wear it to sleep, in fact. So there's some interesting developments happening from the Muse front end in that regard. So I think with EEG, we've really seen, and I've been involved with the early days, as I said, with Neurosky. We tapped into the innovation state. We looked at how alpha, your beta, alpha, theta sort of waves, but the alpha stage where creativity really thrives a lot more. We created something called the iZone, which was the Imagination Innovation Lab for tinkering, and we would run right levels of motivation and doing workshops in innovation to sort of see much better results come up and being able to quantify it with EEG. Because what we really are measuring is your attention and focus versus meditation and relaxation. And we're able to also, there's an interesting application for students, and we were talking earlier that attention spans have reduced quite a bit. So we're able to quantify and look at a Pomodoro type method where you can do time boxing for children to learn faster by having the right amount of gaps in between and being able to see where their attention spans are most ideal. If you can measure that with EEG, with the brainwave, there's actually a tool called Effective Learner. And
did you see Roy's eyes lighten up when you said that?
What's time boxing? So you tell them to learn in a certain when their brainwaves line up.
Yeah. When they're active mind.
When they're the most receptive and when their attention is the highest. And the moment that sort of dies off, you know that it's time to switch off or take a break, basically. So the Pomodoro method is actually about time boxing or taking a break frequently at certain times. So it's like 25 minutes or so. And then you would take a brief break of 5 minutes or so. I'm just giving as an example.
Yeah.
But it can be curated on a personalized level.
Oh, wow.
So that's the power of this sort of technology.
Because would you say, Roy, that you're like the kids are most receptive as soon as you say, right, guys, it's bedtime? they're super active then.
Yeah, because
They
I
know
don't
that
why.
it's time to go. They're like, no, I want to tell you a story.
Yeah, like the life story starts.
That's it. They want to
after
stay
that.
awake
bedtime.
and be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole, you want to give them the tablet, but the tablet is the reward,
Right.
and you want them to do the homework first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You get
Exactly.
your homework
Yeah,
first,
yeah.
then the dopamine.
That's it.
Yeah.
But it's how do you kind of gamify that whole scenario and the environment to make
it's an art
appealing.
form I have not perfected.
Yeah.
Don't worry, many people are in that boat, but I think that's where
Yeah.
technology, through means like this, is sort of aiding us to see, okay, how do we tap into that,
Yeah.
the right potential, and it's about building that mind of the future. So what we're really seeing is examples like Neuralink, which Elon Musk's kind of latest baby. From
Yep.
It's been over like 4 or 5 years now, and areas of deep research and exploration. It's tapping into provide rehab or improve motor skills, key brain function, and moving into sparking even the right neurons to activate certain increased levels of intelligence. So Neuralink is really, it's 1,000 plus fibers injected at a more superficial level above your skull on your cranial level, and it's 100th the size of your human hair, which is robotically sort of injected there.
Yep.
But it's not a deep surgery to that level of
It can be removed.
implantation. It can be removed. Yeah. And what he had was actually a great example of a few months ago when they had the demonstration of their achievements through the three little pigs, which were showcasing what Neuralink has actually been doing. And now the next phase of trials is actually on humans. So it'll be very interesting to see how this evolves, because the type of research and the in-depth neuroscience work that they've been doing is quite phenomenal.
Well, what can it do? It can make the quadriplegics walk, and the
Exactly.
people with no arms have robotic arms, and all
Yep.
this stuff.
Pretty much anything, because the brain controls so much, as we know. It's all about, people, stroke victims. So we've already got startups right now looking at how do we improve motor skills and look at this technology, a similar means of technology adapted for very specific medical conditions or chronic disease, for example, that can be alleviated using this. So it's very much, technology is so advanced now that it becomes almost like magic. And I think we've got one product right here, which I'll be showcasing you, the Halo 2 by Halo Neuroscience, which really takes that brain interaction to a whole new level. So it gives you the right activity, optimizing your time, even recovering lost skills. It aims to use something called TDCS, transcranial direct current stimulation, which sends a very small electric current through the area of your brain to control movement, putting it into a state of hyper learning, and positively influencing what we call neuroplasticity. So imagine if you learning your skills of piano or creative skills much faster, and regaining some of those areas using a technology like this.
So how
being
does
used in sports.
How does it allow the brain to remain more plastic or increase plasticity in the brain?
So it's sending that very low current through your brain through as you're wearing it. So it's sitting on top of with the electrodes on top,
And that increases plasticity.
and that sort of it's paid through an app where you do a prime activity, and it's sort of guiding you through a whole routine, like basically you're taken through a 15-minute or a 20-minute or a half an hour prime, which will then enable you to sort of gain those skills faster. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we've got another tool called Heart Math, which is activating your heart intelligence. And I was very fortunate last year to be spending time in Boulder Creek up in the Heart Math Institute with the founders, and having this device which enables you to tap the potential of your subconscious mind and wisdom and really bring out the power of intuition. So, we are connected to the Earth's energetic fields, and the resonant frequency of the Earth's magnetic field is exactly the same as the human heart rhythm when we are in a coherent stage. So we're talking about the brain-heart coherence and Heart Math Inner Balance, this device, using heart rate variability, which it measures from your ear or connected to your ear, which is one of the best places to measure that. And it actually then helps you with the biofeedback to help you train faster, looking at your breathing, looking at your your heart rhythm patterns to come to that coherent stage much faster through the right activities that it guides you through with the paid app. So it's very much about increasing calm, improving focus, sleeping better, reducing anxiety, increasing your positive outlook. So I mean, the heart has its own brain. So it's actually got 40,000 brain cells which are located in the heart. So you've got more communications happening from the heart to the brain than the other way around. And I think this is what we're tapping here, that the intelligence from your heart is really something which has been untapped potential by us.
Okay.
And that's why a term I'd coined is heart set. In fact, I talk about evolving the title of my book, which I'd been writing for a while, The Philosophy of Innovation from Mindset to Heart Set. So I've got many examples of how the heart set and really connecting heart to heart. In fact, heart math is really quantifying a lot of that connection in that regard.
Right.
So what we're really seeing is that connection. As I said, we talk about B2C or B2B in a corporate world or in our business environment, but I say heart to heart or H2H or human to human is really where, if we connect to that deep level, it's what really enables us to do so much more. And I think all this really brings about that stage of mindfulness and living in the present moment, because yesterday was history, today is a mystery, tomorrow is a mystery, and today is a gift. And that's why we call it the present.
Very good.
Yes. Nice. I like that.
Yes, that's very nice.
So the next phase of my talk is really about smart cities and really looking at projects that I was involved with. So there was an innovation precinct across Hong Kong, China, called the Greater Bay Area, which is the largest of its type. Actually, it's almost like a Silicon Valley 2.0. And it's across 9 cities, regions, including Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Macau, and Guangzhou. And
this is all in China.
In China, in that sort of area. So we're talking about a similar sort of area which I've been looking at, or concepts which we learned from there, into a floating microcity in Tasmania, which we're conceptualizing with my friend George Spiliopoulos, who's down there. And he's part of our White Mirror team, as you know.
Yes.
And, it's really looking at how do we take that environment to a whole new level with human-centric, empathetic design, to stitching experiences and bringing the amalgamation of energy, transportation, education, healthcare, telecoms, infrastructure, and manufacturing all coming together to formulate a new age smart city centered around humanity. And actually that's what Smart Futures Tasmania. So it's about entrepreneurship meets wilderness. So we're bringing in nature, and quantum meets mindset, and humanity meets technology. And that's kind of what we're looking at, this floating smart city out there. And I think it's interesting to take learnings from other places around the world, like even Singapore, which is it a garden in a city or a city in a garden? So bringing nature being a very key part of this whole phenomena, and what we call biophilic design is fundamental. And I think what we're seeing is really this one in the center here, this building, is actually the new headquarters for Atlassian, which is coming up here, right here in above Central in Sydney. And that is actually deploying very smart hybrid materials, and it's using biophilic design. So it's using a lot of imbibing nature elements in there. And it's actually a COVID or pandemic friendly building also, with some very smart elements of sustainability and integration of various aspects of IoT and smart levels which are integrated in there.
Wow.
Interesting learnings I've had from the blue zones of the world, and there are, as you know, 5 of them around the world. This is where people are living as centenarians, the most centenarians, over 100-year-olds in the world. It's because of the environment that they live in, it's the food they eat, the people they interact with, the social world and life.
Happiness, no stress.
Exactly, the happiness quotients and so forth are much
Leaning
higher.
towards vegetables and low meat.
Exactly, it's what the diet and everything. So every
Eat large
holistic approach
families.
of their well-being
Yes.
is integrated into that approach of what constitutes the blue zone. And I've been sort of on this journey saying learnings from there, how can we democratize it using technology? And this was the blue zone I was actually at on this very day last year, after giving that keynote talk and the Wearable Tech Fashion Show in Costa Rica. They took us keynote speakers to the blue zone there in Nicoya Peninsula, and Pura Vida is a term which talks about pure life or simple life. It's a Costa Rican term, and has a very deep meaning to it. And I think it's what we've really learned. And I was so amazed to see the sort of learning. In fact, that's the president of Costa Rica who was at our summit at Singularity Summit last year, and just discussing with him about the Blue Zone philosophy and this whole element of how technology and exponential thinking can lead us to a much higher level. And I think that simple life and learnings from Costa Rica itself have been so amazing. How nature itself has taken to a whole new level, and it's about taking those learnings and taking it to a new level. Interesting touch point I had on this was actually sacred sites. So Martin Gray is a gentleman who renounced the world. He formulated this entity called sacred sites. He traveled the globe for about over 35 years and documented and captured not the historical significance, which most people do, but the spiritual energy and the significance of places and the energy and the aura of landmarks around the world. So I was very fortunate to be introduced to this phenomena. And for about 15 years of my time, I actually traveled at many different locations like Ayers Rock, Katajuta, the Golden Temple, of course, in India, and meditating in the Cheops, in the oldest pyramid in Giza, with my friend Rich Breyer from the US, who introduced me to sacred sites originally. And he and I traveled to Bodh Gaya and many other pilgrimage sort of places to feel that energy. And I think it was that hands-on tinkering of spiritual worlds is what I'm trying to bring and harness and say, okay, how can we bring that sacred sites phenomena through technology? And then we've got key learnings like Burning Man, which is a great phenomena. And Burning Man, as you know, is an event which is held annually. And it in 1986, since 1986 actually. So in 1998, they moved it to a place called Black Rock City in the US, where a temporary city comes up in the Black Rock Desert.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere, northwestern Nevada for 9 days. And the event is held, it's middle of nowhere, pretty much far away from Reno. And it's a temporary metropolis, which is dedicated to community, art, self-expression, and self-reliance. And I think we've seen I was invited to that last year. Unfortunately, it didn't happen physically because of the pandemic, but it was in VR that I witnessed a lot of it in the multiverse, and then of course online. So it was interesting sort of things that play there, and I think we're very fortunate to be having a great team member, one of the key instigators at Burning Man and VR, a friend Brian Kravitz, who's created the Unity Sanctuary, and what he's done, in fact, right here, is a truly spiritual experience in VR. And the Unity Sanctuary is a multicultural place for sound and light healing. Its design is based on religious and cultural ideologies and aesthetics. It deploys deep mathematical design using sacred geometry. So there's some very interesting learnings from there we're sort of imbibing. And all that sort of emerges into this phenomena. And again, coming to that point now of white mirror. And, having, I think many of us have seen the Netflix show of Black Mirror, which is, a very powerful show.
Yes.
But it's unfortunately creates a lot of fear and anxiety, and especially for the layman. I think for us who are in technology, for us it does instigate some interesting excitement and buzz to see what could go wrong. So I think it's that contrast we've seen. But I think for the general public is where we really need to look at a utopia rather than a dystopia. So it's that model from looking from scarcity to abundance, from fear to love, looking from me to we, and from isolation to connection, and just being from a watcher to a participant is what we talk about the key constituents of White Mirror, as a movement, as a philosophy, as a mindset. And I think that's kind of what I put together in my original paper. And I was so fortunate that now I'm not the one who, I don't claim White Mirror as what I did, but it's something which we are co-creating, and yourself included now as one of the key co-creators. And I think the contributors to White Mirror is just amazing to see what we're coming up with right now. So with White Mirror, we're really seeing that phenomena of moving into that abundant mindset philosophy, looking at how can we manifest it through so many different ways. And I think we've taken learnings from Wisdom Health, and many other sort of entities around the world, and learnings from very positive psychology-driven experiences. And this was the original article that I'd sort of written on that in LinkedIn. But we talk about moving from dystopia to utopia to a Vtopia, and it's about including everybody, and as aligning it very close to the UN SDGs.
Mm.
It's really about the purpose of White Mirror is to curate that better universe or ecosystem by accelerating technology adoption to helping us attain the UN SDGs. And I think it's about how do we have participants opt into a positive future that we can create with removing those psychological barriers. And I think there's dystopias that have been painted by shows like Black Mirror, Westworld, Brave New Worlds, and so many others is what we need to flip, and which is what we're on that journey to aligning ourselves with the SDGs right now. And I think we've done some interesting explorations in SDG 3, 4, 17, 9, which is really around education, health and wellness, partnerships and goals, innovation, and so forth. Interesting way to depict the SDGs in a circular sort of economy fashion as we move from biosphere, society, and economy.
Well, they're all interconnected, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yes.
yeah. So I think it's how do we harness it and make it into a more powerful sort of area. And one of the stories that I'd come up with were ideas in implementing a White Mirror implementation is a fusion of exponential or humane technologies with, say, technologies which are existing, and I'd mentioned earlier, like HeartMath, Muse S Band, Trip VR which we can witness through Oculus Quest, for example, Halo Sport, and Tesla Suit. So all of that sort of combining into and putting you into a kind of an igloo of holistic well-being as a very early tinker of ideas. We've got our Singularity U Australia Summit coming up, and we've actually looked at science fiction comic books, which is based around the Museum of the Future, and it's really the superpowers for humanity. And I think it's trying to harness those superpowers that we can witness through is what we're looking at through White Mirror, on how do we bring the world to a new level and make that science fiction into a science reality.
Yeah.
And here's some examples of some of the comic book elements there. We've got Calm Mini, which is another product that is being devised under White Mirror sort of thinking by Inspire XR, which is using frequency healing and looking at very specific frequency ranges of 100 hertz to 20 kilohertz for sound based scenarios for frequencies that will help us for the healing energies that can harness us to the next level.
Wow.
Then we've got VR experiences, we've got the connected experience, and again we've all been working together very closely on this, on how do we imbibe an experience which is bridging the gap between functional art, science, and technology, and ancient wisdom to help heal the world. And of course, another great example of White Mirror is very much what you've done, Roy, is the Mars Girl, which is a great film and a clip that we're seeing that how, and in fact it's so timely when we talk about Perseverance recently landed on Mars, 480 million miles away, the journey of 7 months that took, and just a few days ago we had that NASA the most sophisticated rover on the planet, which is now actually mining and digging deep and looking for some amazing and provided some amazing photography and scenarios of the red planet. And I think so we're very much on that journey, so that Mars Girl one day when who's going to be born and brought up in Mars will return to Earth and look at the abundance and realize and make us Earthlings realize how
what we have
exactly, to value what we really can do with so much abundance. And I think that's what we really need, and I think that's so synergetic with the White Mirror philosophy. So I'm very grateful to you to have that brought on board for White Mirror. And I think we've got other aspects of White Mirror, like the wellness retreats, forest bathing, looking at I was up in Wollomboy, which at a friend's 300 acres sort of pristine nature rainforest. Spending some time there in Mount Yengo with Aboriginal, indigenous sort of ancient wisdom learnings and sacred sites, which we can imbibe and actually combine to create some really interesting experiences as part of the White Mirror thinking. Something I'd also started a few years ago called the Exponential Thought Leaders Bushwalk the Talk, which is helping discuss some of those in a very natural environment, some of the global grand challenges and how we can collectively help collaborate and solve them.
That's great.
And I think something we came up with in White Mirror team, as you know, is about the we. What do we want to be in the story? Moving from that fear zone to learning, to growth, to action. So I think we've seen with the pandemic, the fear zone was when we complained.
Yeah.
The learning zone was when we identified with the emotions. The growth was when we had gratitude, and the action was really giving back to people and the planet. And I think what I talk about in White Mirror is really very much imagine on the other side of the pandemic, or as we sort of evolve, imagine if every organization becomes like a B Corp, or where things of planet, people, and purpose before profits. So
that's a beautiful goal.
Yeah. So
that would solve so many things.
Yeah, exactly. So we've really seen that, we talked about the Industrial Revolution, and I think the key skills, we've seen that the World Economic Forum has also been talking about an increase in the rise of some key skills like creativity, critical thinking, and, cognitive flexibility and so forth, which have risen up the ladder. And we can actually measure a lot of these 21st century skills. There's some tinkering happening with Neuroscience, with a tool called the peak performance algorithm, where we can actually quantify 27 different states by the NeuroCloud, and we can look at your gross happiness quotients, creativity, even look at negative emotional states, for example, like arousal and anger and so forth. But when you're able to sort of brain map them and see how they're playing, it's pretty interesting how you can look at those skills and imbibe them to a new level. So it's about creating these new intelligence dogmas as we evolve from user experience to user engagement, consumer to community, needs to wants, empathy to meaning, story to narrative, and so forth. And this one's a great book, by the way. Bruce Nussbaum wrote Creative Intelligence, which alludes to many of these areas. And I talked about the Ikigai briefly earlier.
Yes.
It's really what you love to do, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for, and what you're good at. When all of that sort of confides,
that's where you want to be.
To take it together, and
that's where we want to be.
Yes, your reason for being, exactly. Yeah,
Ikigai.
Very deep Japanese philosophy and concept, which is aligned to our massively transforming purpose, as we talk about in SU. And one of the entities that I was involved with, the World Economic Forum last year, that 35 global leaders, and I was very fortunate to be amongst that group, got together to formulate this thing called Wisdom Health, the global community of conscious leadership, which our friend Alvaro, who's also part of our White Mirror team, and exploring regenerative humanity, the role of humane technologies and ancient futures, and really looking at conscious models for leadership. And I think it's that transformation that we've been looking through Wisdom Health, and how that can be sort of sparked to a whole new living. And some of the work that Alvaro has done with his company, Empathica, which is looking at empathy and compassion and really driving that and providing that manifestation through a virtual reality sort of area. So I talked about VUCA in the beginning, and we really need to transform that to a new VUCA, which is vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. And I think that's where we'll really see that new phenomena of a more abundant future, and something that we can really come up and shape and not just predict. And I love this thing by an anonymous person who said the world is moving so fast that when a person who says it can't be done is interrupted by a person who's already doing it. And the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not just occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to go through. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Wow, that's pretty deep.
I've got a lot of other slides now. I mean, I don't know if you want to
Cut
if you want. Yeah.
So now